Well, hello everyone, welcome to another very exciting episode here on the MIgardener channel. Really excited for this one because it is an absolutely incredible day here in Michigan. The sun is out, it is nice and bright. I can see my breath, but that's okay because the sun's out. It's invigorating, it's so warm in the sun, and I decided to come out here to the compost pile to answer quite a few questions that came up on our last video, or I guess 2 videos ago, where we were cleaning up the garden and we were throwing a lot of it on the compost pile. We had a lot of questions coming up, so I figured I'd answer those questions, hopefully help those people out, but also in the process of helping those people out, hopefully help a lot more people out, because that's usually how it goes. One person has a question and 10 other people have the same question but just don't want to ask it. There's a lot of gray area where people just kind of, they're not really sure exact answers to their questions about composting, and so I'm going to kind of pinpoint a few of the questions that came up that I do think are kind of in that kind of gray area that need a little more light touched on. The first one is animals getting into your compost pile. We had a lot of people say, you know, Luke, you're throwing in peppers, tomatoes, Swiss chard, a lot of kind of food scraps. Why aren't you worried about mice or rats or other raccoons getting into your compost pile? And the answer is simply, I'm not very concerned for my specific area about rats, mice, and raccoons because they're simply not here. We live in a place where there's a lot of open land, there's a lot of cats and predatory birds, there's just not a lot of mice. I might have only seen one mouse my entire life here while living in this location. So there's really not a lot of mice even present. Rats, I would say, is non-existent. We don't have rats in this area. Raccoons, different story. I have seen raccoons, but there's not a presence of raccoons here in my bed. You'd normally see like scraps and stuff kind of ripped apart. I've seen raccoon damage, and the pile is untouched. So you would tell if there's a raccoon. It would look like someone was, you know, digging for buried treasure inside of a compost pile. It would just be thrown everywhere because that's what they do to trash bags. So there's no raccoon presence here, so I am perfectly fine with my compost pile. But I can't speak for everyone. I can't say that this is going to be the case for every compost pile everywhere in the world, because there's a lot of different circumstances. And I think that's definitely something that I want to touch on with this episode, is that what happens for me won't necessarily happen for you when it comes to rats or pests getting into your compost pile, because if it was New York, where there's a huge rat population, might be completely a different story. So what you have to do is kind of go off of your area, go off of what you know about your area, and if you feel unsure, there's lots of different composting methods available. We have episodes we've done on trash can composting. That's a great, very reliable method. I will try to post links to it in the description box below, because I think it will really help people out, especially those living in an urban setting where rats and mice are way more present. You don't have to even use a trash can composter. You can do an elevated compost, like a compost tumbler that's actually up in the air, that, you know, is off the ground and is concealed inside of a barrel. You can use that method. So there's lots of other methods available to people that are concerned about pests getting into their compost pile. I just am not personally. So take it for what it's worth, but definitely, you know, it's not a concern for me. Now, the next thing that I wanted to touch on was composting during the winter. A lot of people saw me throwing on all these uncomposted materials. We had grass clippings even thrown on here and shredded up leaves. And a lot of times people said in the comments box, well, Luke, you're throwing all this stuff on in late fall. Shouldn't you have done it sooner so it would have time to compost? And my answer to that is, compost doesn't really know a season. There's not a composting season. You throw it on, and if you have enough biomass put on in one location, it's going to insulate itself and it's going to create its own heat and generate its own heat, meaning that yes, the outside will get colder, it could even snow, and the outside would not compost as fast, but the inside would compost just as if it was a summer day. So it really doesn't matter the time of year. You can compost all winter long. And I do think that's a big misconception with a lot of people, is they say, you know, you have to have warm temperatures to compost. True, warm temperatures help compost the entire pile better. But if I were to break into this, which I will show you, I'll break into the center, and I do imagine to see quite a bit of steam because it is constantly composting even throughout winter. Another thing you can do to help you out is, you know, in about 3 or 4 weeks or so, when we do start getting regular snows, I'm going to take a black tarp and put a black tarp over this. You can get a black tarp for about $3 or $4 at any hardware store, and that's going to help kind of absorb some of that solar radiation, some of the sun's rays, and it's going to help warm up the pile even that much more. Just like my jacket here is dark, it's going to absorb those sun's rays, and I feel a whole lot more warm in the sun. And the same applies for your compost pile. So it's really going to help you compost all winter long, so you do have finished compost in the spring. It is possible. We do it every year, and so yes, you can do it as well. Now, the next thing I wanted to touch on was a question about throwing whole plants into the compost pile. People oftentimes think about plant waste, and they say, well, certain stuff should not be composted because it more easily breaks down than others. And this is true. I wanted to touch on this because I think it's a very big misconception that you don't want to compost whole plants. For instance, I threw in a whole basil plant here. True, this will take a lot longer to break down, but if you're short on time or you don't like fussing with it like I do, you can throw it in and it will compost. It will break down. The thing is, you're going to have to sift through your compost, and we have videos on sifting compost. We do that anyways. And that sifts out all the uncomposted plant material. You throw that back into the compost pile. It continues breaking down till another time when you need it. It saves a lot of time. It allows you to compost the entire plant. And it's really a no fuss, no muss type of approach to composting, because I could run those over with the lawnmower. I could mulch them up. It's another process. It takes more time. And when my time is valuable, I like to just throw it all on a compost pile. You can do that. It's not going to harm it. Even sometimes people say, well, you can't compost whole tomato plants, or you can't compost whole corn stalks. You can compost whole corn stalks. It'll just take a lot longer. So there are really no don'ts to composting as long as it pertains to organic matter. You can compost literally anything. You can compost whole logs. They just take a heck of a lot longer to compost than if they were broken down into wood chips. So it's all about particle size when it comes to composting and how long it takes, but it does not say that it won't ever compost and it's not worth composting. So I did want to touch on that one too, because I think that one kind of came up, I think 2 or 3 times, where people saw me putting whole plants in the compost pile and they were gasping that I wasn't running them over with a lawnmower. It simply has to do with my schedule and my time. I just don't have time to pull out the lawnmower and mulch everything up into tiny pieces. If I do, that's great, but if not, it'll still break down. And the final thing that I wanted to touch on is what I do with my compost after it's finished. A lot of times we have this coming up in our other composting videos, because I'm actually showing finished compost in the process. This one came up, I think, once or twice in the comment section, so it's still worth touching on as well. But I'm gonna have to take you over to the finished compost side to show you what we do with it, and that way I can get you a good answer. So let's go over there. All right, so now I'm over here by our finished compost pile, and you'll notice it looks a whole lot different because it's finished, and it looks so beautiful. It is black, it is rich, and it's crumbly. It's what you like to see. It smells very earthy, but what do we do with it? What do we do with it when it's done? Now, this is a question that does, like I said, come up very frequently, because I think oftentimes people, they see it done and they're like, I have to use it right away. Well, it's good to use it right away. Compost is definitely better when it's new, but the fact of the matter is you can let it set here, and it's not going to change very much. It will lose some nutrients over time, and I'm aware of that. But there are a few things that you can do to limit the amount of nutrients that are lost over time. The first thing is, by letting it weather, you're going to actually allow it to break up. It becomes more crumbly over time. When it's first finished, oftentimes people are afraid to use it, even though it's at its best when it's kind of a little slimy. It's kind of weird to say, but if you take organic matter and it's breaking down, there's a lot of moisture content. It can be kind of slimy, like grass clippings when they're breaking down. They can kind of cling together, mat together, and they just kind of are very clingy to each other. And this helps it break down. By leaving it out for about a month or two, it helps it break down and crumble, so it's a little more manageable to use and to handle, I guess. But once it's done weathering, it's very important to cover it. And so we have just a pallet over top here. It's not perfect, but that's because I still have yet to get my fall tarps. I wait till after leaf raking season, and they end up going on sale after fall. So I typically will wait till the first couple snowfalls when people are done raking leaves, and then I'll go to my hardware store, and they're always on sale every single year. So tip to save you a little bit of money. But I go get tarps and I'll tarp my compost. And that way what happens is the snow from the winter will set on top of the tarp rather than sitting on top of the compost. And same thing in spring. When early spring comes and it starts raining, the rain will hit the tarp and not the compost. And that barrier will prevent any precipitation from flowing down through the compost, leading to leaching. Because leaching is a natural thing that will happen. It happens in your garden, and that's why I always recommend remineralizing or covering your soil at all times. Because that precipitation, if it has no barrier, it'll run right through the soil, and any available nutrients like nitrogen, water-soluble nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, even some micronutrients, they'll simply flow right through your soil because they basically cling to that water, mix it in, they mix in with the water, and then flow right through your soil past where your roots can access them. And that is how you have nutrient deficiencies in your soil, even when you've applied really good, rich, fertile soil. So it's just a practice that we like to do. It's something that you can do as well. And that is the only thing that we do with finished compost. So once it's finished, we let it weather for about a month or two so it becomes crumbly and manageable. We tarp it, and it can sit there until it's ready to be used. And that's really it. So I hope that answers all your questions about composting, or at least the ones that came up on the latest composting video. I do hope you enjoyed. Hopefully you learned something new. I hope you all are composting. It is a great way to save money in the garden and increase your garden's health and increase your success in the garden as well. So I'll catch you all later on the next episode. This is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home, and we'll catch you all later. See ya.